President Donald Trump's appearance at the NATO summit in The Hague coincided with a provocative move by Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah, who introduced a bill calling for the United States to withdraw from the alliance. Titled the Not a Trusted Organization, NATO Act, the bill takes a direct swipe at the transatlantic alliance by asserting that NATO has outlived its original purpose. Lee argued that the organization, formed in 1949 to counter the Soviet Union, is no longer relevant in today's geopolitical climate, and accused European member states of freeloading off American taxpayers, who he claims have shouldered the cost of European defense for generations. The bill calls on President Trump to initiate a formal withdrawal by invoking Article 13 of the NATO Treaty, which allows any member nation to leave the alliance after providing a one-year notice to the North Atlantic Council. In addition to mandating withdrawal, the legislation seeks to halt all U.S. financial contributions to the alliance immediately. Senator Lee's bill is part of a broader effort to reassess America's role in NATO and challenge what some Republicans see as outdated global commitments that no longer serve U.S. interests. The bill was introduced shortly after the conclusion of a two-day NATO summit that highlighted both unity and tension among allies. At the summit, President Trump notably praised member nations for agreeing to boost their defense spending, with a new target set at 5% of GDP. This marks a significant increase from the previous 2% goal that many members had struggled to meet. Trump's support for the new spending benchmark appeared to signal a softer stance toward the alliance compared to his previous term, when he frequently criticized NATO and questioned its value to U.S. national security. However, the legislative path forward for Lee's NATO withdrawal bill is far from certain. Congress has already taken proactive steps in recent years to protect U.S. membership in NATO from unilateral executive action. In December 2023, a bipartisan provision included in the National Defense Authorization Act required that any move to exit NATO receive either Senate approval or the passage of a separate act of Congress. This provision was rooted in similar legislation passed by the House in 2019, which sought to block President Trump from withdrawing the U.S. from NATO without congressional approval, amid widespread concern over his skepticism of international alliances. To bolster his case for withdrawal, Senator Lee also introduced two companion bills, the Allied Burden Sharing Report Act and the NATO Burden Sharing Report Act. These measures aim to provide detailed analyses of defense spending among NATO members, identifying which countries are meeting their commitments and which are not. Senators Rand Paul of Kentucky and Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee have signed on in support. Blackburn emphasized that the legislation will shine a light on who's paying their fair share and who's not, reflecting a long-standing conservative criticism of the alliance's financial structure. Despite past criticisms, President Trump appeared more measured at the summit. While reaffirming his America First philosophy, he stated his support for NATO's Article 5 Mutual Defense Clause, the cornerstone of the alliance, which commits members to defend one another in the event of an attack. "If I didn't stand with it, I wouldn't be here," Trump said, signaling that despite his historical reservations, he still sees strategic value in maintaining the alliance. His comments may have reassured some NATO members, though uncertainty remains about the long-term direction of U.S. foreign policy. According to Michael Williams, Associate Professor of Public Administration and International Affairs at Syracuse University's Maxwell School, who attended the summit, the atmosphere was tense, particularly given this was the first NATO gathering under Trump's renewed presidency. Williams noted that Secretary General Mark Rutte made a concerted effort to align members around the new defense spending goal and to address Trump's concerns directly. The question is whether the Europeans are using this summit to buy time for their own capability development, or if they truly believe the U.S. is still a committed ally, Williams said, reflecting ongoing doubts within Europe about America's strategic intentions. Senator Lee defended his proposal by framing it as a return to American sovereignty and financial responsibility. America's withdrawal from NATO is long overdue, he said. NATO has run its course. The threats that existed at its inception are no longer relevant 76 years later. If they were, Europe would be paying their fair share, instead of making American taxpayers pick up the check for decades. My legislation will put America first by withdrawing us from the raw deal NATO has become. While the Not a Trusted Organization Act has stirred debate and grabbed headlines, its future remains uncertain. With bipartisan opposition to leaving NATO firmly in place, and with President Trump now expressing more overt support for the alliance's core principles and expanded military commitments, the bill may ultimately serve more as a political statement than a practical roadmap for U.S. disengagement. Still, it underscores deep divisions within the Republican Party and the broader American political landscape over the country's role on the world stage and whether traditional alliances like NATO still serve the national interest in the era of great power competition with China and a resurgent Russia.